This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. The president's Supreme Court nominee is going on the offensive, talking to Fox News about the sexual assault allegations he faces. Brett Kavanaugh denied all the allegations against him Monday evening, saying he's never sexually assaulted anyone.
I never did any such thing. Never did any such thing. The other people alleged to be there don't recall any such thing. If such a thing had happened, it would have been the talk of campus. The women I knew in college and the men I knew in college says it's inconceivable that I could have done such a thing. And the New York Times has reported that just last week, the person making the accusation was calling other classmates saying she was not sure that I had done this.
And our Heather Sells joins us now. She's following the story for us today. So Heather, what was that interview like?
It was really different. You know, it was historic, unprecedented. I also found it awkward. You know, here they're talking about sexual assault allegations and also repetitive. He did repeat himself a lot, just seemed really determined to stay on message, kept talking about I want a fair process and I've treated women with dignity and respect. He did get a little emotional at the end, and that was interesting to see, too.
Does the president appear to still be supporting him?
Publicly, you see the president going on camera yesterday saying, you know, I'm giving my full support to Kavanaugh. And Kavanaugh mentioned in the Fox News interview that, yes, the president called me today. He still supports me. So publicly, everything looks good from that perspective.
What's going to happen next?
On Thursday, there will be a Senate hearing. That's the plan for right now. Kavanaugh will speak. His high school accuser, Christine Ford, will speak. And we will see how it plays out.
We'll all be watching and following this for sure. Thank you so much, Heather. Here's a quick look now at some of the other major headlines we are following for you today inside the CBN newsroom. President Donald Trump plans to meet with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein Thursday to discuss Rosenstein's future with the administration. This meeting comes after the New York Times reported Rosenstein talked about recruiting cabinet members to remove President Trump from office. Rosenstein was summoned to the White House Monday as reports speculated he was either going to be fired or to resign from his position. But he will stay in his job for now. Meanwhile, the president will address the United Nations General Assembly Tuesday. He's expected to discuss North Korea removing the U.S. from the Iranian nuclear deal accord and objecting to the UN aid program he believes are contrary to America's interests. The president will also chair a meeting of the UN Security Council on the topic of counterproliferation. Evangelist Anne Graham Lotz is praising God following a successful surgery to remove breast cancer. Earlier this month, she revealed she was diagnosed with the disease and would be undergoing surgery. In a Facebook post, she wrote that, quote, all went well. She also thanked everyone for their prayers. Hurricane Florence brought high winds, heavy rains, and devastating flooding across the Carolinas, but many families are finding the extra support and relief they need, all thanks to CBN's Operation Blessing. Lumberton, North Carolina resident Diane Martin said in the middle of the night, Florence caused a huge tree to come crashing down in her yard. She said it sounded like a big boom. Operation Blessing showed up to cut the tree into manageable pieces to be hauled off. Martin was extremely grateful.
But you are being his hands and his feet extended. I say that. Yeah. I've seen Jesus in the work that y'all are doing.
Martin said she was thankful not only for the help of Operation Blessing, but for what teams have been doing for thousands of hurricane victims all across the state. America's United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley has a message for Iran. The United States is not to blame for a terrorist attack this weekend in Iran on its annual military parade. Iran's President Rouhani blamed the United States, but Haley said on CNN he should look at the problems in his own country first.
He needs to look at his own home base. He's got the Iranian people are protesting. Every ounce of money that goes into Iran goes to his military. He has oppressed his people for a long time, and he needs to look at his own base to figure out where that's coming from. I think the Iranian people have had enough, and that's where all of this is coming from. But having said that, he can blame us all he wants. The thing he's got to do is look in the mirror.
Haley also says Iran's economy is plummeting after President Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal earlier this year. Our Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now live to discuss the threats made by Iran. So, Chris, how credible are the threats by Iran to strike the U.S. and Israel?
Well, Ephraim, they're very credible, and it's a question of when and where. Iran has a lot of options they can use. Many times they use proxies like Hezbollah to carry out an attack. So I wouldn't say a direct confrontation just yet, but could be an attack on Israel's northern border. It could be a terror attack somewhere in Europe. I doubt the United States, but Iran has many ways that they can respond to this kind of threat.
Let's look inside. What's going on inside Iran that is threatening the regime?
Well, it's a huge change right now, and it really has a lot to do with the Trump administration and the internal and the external pressure that the regime is facing. Internally, people are taking to the streets, literally in Tehran and dozens of cities all over the place. They're talking about the economy. The economy is in a free fall. Inflation is growing. The rial, the currency of Iran, is falling. And many times that's because of the treasure that Iran is using to have wars all over the Middle East. So the Iranian people are beginning to blame the regime. Externally, the Trump administration, as the sanctions, they got out of the Iranian nuclear deal, and all this is happening with another sanctions and the reduction of oil supplies in November. And it all has led Rudy Giuliani to say just the other day that regime change is coming. It's a question, not a question of if, but when.
Chris, on another matter, Russia is selling a sophisticated air defense system to Syria. How significant is that to Israel?
It's one of the biggest stories right now, Ephraim. And what's happening is that there was a downing of a Russian plane just about a week and a half ago. Russia is blaming Israel. Israel is saying it was the Syrians who did that. And now Russia is giving Syria what's called the S-300. It's one of the most sophisticated air defenses in the world. And that's going to make a lot harder for Israel to go ahead and attack Iranian military bases inside Syria. That's their number one military goal. And now if Russia is going to send this air defense system to Syria and also maybe not give permission like they have been in the last couple of years to Israel, it's going to make it much harder for Israel. In the past 2 years, they've struck over 200 Iranian military targets inside Syria, and that's just part of their goal to keep Iran out of their next door neighbor.
All right, Chris Mitchell reporting for us live in Jerusalem today. Chris, thank you for your time. Coming up, why some believe Turkey's president is hoping to build an Islamic army against the state of Israel. We've got that story. Stay with us. Turkish leaders are hinting American pastor Andrew Brunson could be released next month at his next hearing, October 12th, if the U.S. stops putting pressure on the country. Brunson is currently under house arrest after spending nearly 2 years in a Turkish prison accused of crimes related to his Christian faith. His daughter spoke at this year's Values Voters Summit in Washington, D.C., and says it's been difficult for her dad as well as the entire family.
I'll say there are times when I'm not necessarily happy with God's plan in this situation, but I've really come to realize that God is in complete control and He has a plan. And this is all for His glory. He is worth everything that my family has gone through. And I've seen that message coming through in letters from my dad as well, as he has started to transform and really submit to God and say, God, my life is yours. Whatever you do with me, let it honor you. Let it declare your name and your goodness to people. And I am
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also spoke at the event and says the United States is sparing no effort to see Brunson returned home safely. Some see Brunson's imprisonment as just one more example of Turkish President Erdogan's growing antagonism towards the West. As Dale Hurd reports, many believe he wants to revive the glory of the Ottoman Empire to Turkey.
The man who fashions himself as the new sultan of a revived Ottoman Empire has big dreams. And one of them could well be to build an Islamic army against the state of Israel.
A Turkish newspaper closely allied with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his ruling party published an article in December entitled "A Call for Urgent Action." The Middle East Media Research Institute reports it's the brainchild of one of Erdogan's closest advisors. It looks like a blueprint for an Islamic military action against Israel. It calls on the 57 Muslim nations of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC, to launch a joint military operation against Israel. Such an army would be mammoth. The OIC nations together make up more than 1.5 billion people. The plan calls for staging areas near Israel's border, from which an initial force of 250,000 soldiers would attack Israel. But is it a real threat? Former Turkish parliament member Aykan Erdemir told us he's skeptical.
I would say this piece has more to do with domestic politics than with foreign policy. Erdogan is a very complex politician, and when it comes to Israel, he compartmentalizes. On the one hand, Israel is often at the top of his targets, but at the same time, Erdogan also manages to continue bilateral relations of trade and cooperation.
After the Trump administration's official recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, Erdogan turned up the anti-Israel rhetoric, calling Israel a state of occupation and terrorism. He's also turned on an old NATO ally, the United States, especially over U.S. support for the Kurds, warning the Americans could get, quote, the Ottoman slap.
Erdogan continues to make threats against U.S., accusing U.S. to be kind of the mastermind of a global conspiracy alongside Jews to undermine Turkey.
Turkey continues to hold American missionary pastor Andrew Brunson on charges he was a mastermind in the 2016 coup attempt, a claim the American Center for Law and Justice, which is assisting Brunson, has branded ridiculous. Erdemir agrees.
We argue that Pastor Brunson is basically a hostage, and Erdogan uses him as a pawn.
Erdogan's anti-U.S. and anti-Israel campaigns have worked. Most Turkish citizens now believe the U.S. is the #1 threat to Turkey, just as an overwhelming majority are anti-Semitic and anti-Israel.
Whether the plan for a Muslim army to move against Israel is a serious threat or not, the fact there are voices calling for such action is alarming. The fact that it comes from persons close to Erdogan, even more alarming. And those voices in the Islamic world are not likely to go away. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Up next, a look into the life of a former con artist who now works to prevent crimes that he actually used to commit. Stay with me. And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. His story caught the attention of film director Steven Spielberg, who put it on the big screen in a hit movie called Catch Me If You Can. His name is Frank Abagnale, and he used to be one of the world's most famous con men. I'm Mark Martin, caught up with the former con artist who now works to prevent the crimes he used to commit.
I'd like to cash this check here, and then I'd like to take you out for a steak dinner.
Leonardo DiCaprio played former con man Frank Abagnale in the 2000 film Catch Me If You Can.
I can't stop. It's my job.
Tom Hanks plays the FBI agent who finally tracked down the 21-year-old Abagnale in France after a 5-year crime spree.
I ran away from home when I was 16, basically because my parents were getting a divorce and a judge in family court was making me choose which parent to live with. So I chose to run away instead.
He admits life on the run was by no means glamorous, regularly crying himself to sleep. CBN News sat down with the now 70-year-old at a Scam Jam event.
I started writing checks to support myself when money ran out. I kept writing the checks. I impersonated an airline pilot for a couple of years. I worked in a hospital as a doctor for a while. I took the bar in Louisiana and practiced law there for a while. And by the time I was 21, I'd written about $2.5 million worth of bad checks in 26 countries and 50 states.
Nearly 50 years later, part of life involves being the face of AARP's Fraud Watch network. He speaks on avoiding scams and ways to protect families from crimes, including identity theft.
Abagnale has served as AARP's Fraud Watch network ambassador for 4 years now. He shares his criminal past and turnaround with audiences and also talks about potential pitfalls created by criminals in today's high-tech world.
Life on the other side began after the pursuing FBI agent rescued Abagnale from a federal prison in Virginia. The movie character's name is Carl Hanratty. In real life, it was Joseph Shea.
He persuaded the government that he felt that I would be a great asset to the government if they took me out of prison to basically not only help educate agents to think out of the box and to look at things not as black and white, but also to do undercover work for the Bureau, because I could take on these roles as different people and get enough time doing it to get enough information.
After 6 years, Abagnale was free to leave the FBI. He chose to stay and has worked for the Bureau for more than 40 years. Abagnale credits those close to him for helping him turn his life around.
So it was more about my wife changing my life and my family and the responsibility of family, and then learning the love of country and being surrounded by people who influence you as a young person is what really changed my life.
Today, Abagnale teaches at the FBI Academy, trains agents in the field, and assists agents on cases. He's also an author, public speaker, and consultant. His website describes him as one of the world's most respected authorities on forgery, embezzlement, and secure documents.
Last 20 years all been cyber related, about breaches and cyber crimes and malware, ransomware, and those things.
He says a few years ago, AARP contacted him about sharing ways to protect the elderly from fraud. A survey showed fraud as the #1 concern for the organization's more than 38 million members.
The actual incidence of fraud and ID theft, fraud mostly, it's drastically underreported because someone feels vulnerable and they don't want to admit it. Having people come together makes people realize, I'm not in this alone. And one of the first steps to being able to remedy the situation is to admit that it happened.
Abagnale says people should know that every scam is basically the same.
At some point in that conversation, I'm going to either ask you for money or I'm going to ask you for information, social security number, date of birth, bank account number. Those are the red flags.
He adds each scam is simple to solve by what he calls stop and verify.
So if I call and say I'm the IRS and you owe back taxes and you need to pay immediately right this minute, I just hang up the phone and go to the white pages and look up the IRS, or go to the government pages and look up the IRS, call the IRS that I received this call, this is a person's name, and they're going to tell me that's a scam, ignore the call.
Abagnale says education is the most powerful weapon in fighting crime. And this former con artist has chosen to spend his life on the right side of the law, sharing that knowledge. Mark Martin, CBN News, Virginia Beach.
Glad to have him on the right side of the law. Stay with us. There's much more of CBN NewsWatch coming up, and it's coming up right after this. A new school year brings thousands of international students to universities across the United States. Fitting in can be difficult as they adjust to a new language, a new culture, and academic challenges. But when locals roll out the welcome mat, strangers become friends, and the challenge becomes easier. Emily Jones shows us how.
More than 1,000 international students have enrolled at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia this fall. But across the United States, there are Chinese, Indian, Saudi Arabian, and other nationalities, more than 1 million in total, who've enrolled in international programs this year.
17 years ago, Dr. Kurnia Pho was one of those students, arriving with his family from Indonesia. Now he's giving other internationals a helping hand.
We have international students and scholars and their families that come from different parts of the world. They pursue education and pursuing their future and their career.
Pho founded Global Student Friendship, a campus ministry supported by local churches. Today, he has invited over 100 arriving students to a welcome lunch.
They just arrived maybe a couple of days ago, but with this sense of welcoming and giving them a cup of water, a plate full of meal, it's something that we'll feel for them. This represents something, speak to their heart, that these people care about me.
The friendships formed here lead to family outings and meals in American homes during the school year. It's something most foreign students don't experience.
88% of internationals are never invited into an American home, and actually even worse for immigrants. They live here maybe 20 years and they don't have American friends either.
Anticipating the needs of these arriving students, the Global Friendship Team also provides welcome bags full of household items, free rides to the grocery store, and even furniture for empty apartments.
When we came to Norfolk, we didn't had anything in our apartment, but from this organization, we got a lot of furnitures like student desk, a dining table, couch.
Next semester, the ministry will open The Globe, a housing unit for 60 international students next to the ODU campus. It's just one of many opportunities to befriend internationals.
Imagine being able to find someone from almost any country that you're interested in and know that God brought them here for a reason. And so we Americans have this amazing opportunity to engage the world. So just reach out and give a little bit of time, a little bit of money, a little bit of food, and you have done what takes missionaries overseas years to accomplish. It's so easy.
Emily Jones, CBN News.
Beautiful, beautiful. Right now, it is time for your Tuesday Tweetable. This is a message I pray will first inspire you and then also move you to post tag tweet and share it with others. Consider this. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? Here's a thought to remember. In God, there is no failure. Even if it looks like a failure to you, you must remember that God causes all things to work together for your good. So with that, it's not a failure at all. And with that, I encourage you to make this a victorious Tuesday because you are indeed victorious. And that's going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make this a terrific Tuesday. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless. Make it a great day.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. The president's Supreme Court nominee is going on the offensive, going on Fox News to talk about the sexual assault allegations he faces. Brett Kavanaugh denied all the allegations against him Monday evening, saying he's never sexually assaulted anyone.
I never did any such thing. Never did any such thing. The other people alleged to be there don't recall any such thing. If such a thing had happened, it would have been the talk of campus. The women I knew in college and the men I knew in college says it's inconceivable that I could have done such a thing. And the New York Times has reported that just last week, the person making the accusation was calling other classmates saying she was not sure that I had done this.
And Regent University Law School professor Brad Jacobs joins us now to talk about this story and explore it even more. So first, your take on these latest developments.
Well, you never want to take allegations of sexual abuse or misconduct lightly. You know, the Me Too movement is important. Many women have suffered. But the problem in cases like this is you can't let someone be destroyed by an allegation that can't be proven, whether it's sexual misconduct or an allegation that he stole a bicycle or that he, ran a red light. Any kind of allegation, if it's nothing more than one person said, you have to say, even though this is important, we've got to look for proof. We've got to look for some evidence supporting the story.
That said, we've got two allegations. How should the Judiciary Committee handle these accusations?
Well, I think they need to bring the accusers in and hear them. And if there is anything that can support their stories, that needs to be brought forward. So far, we know the most about Dr. Ford's allegations, and there isn't anything as of yet to corroborate it. She's placed two other witnesses on the site, and they both deny it. Nothing contemporaneous has happened that supports her story. So the Senate committee needs to do as much digging as it can to see if there are facts.
Now, some conservatives have pointed to Congressman Keith Ellison. He's a Democrat running for Minnesota Attorney General. He's got claims against him, including a woman with pictures and evidence and police reports, some say, but Democrats are not looking to investigate him. Double standard here?
Well, honestly, most of the political people in Washington tend to react differently to things depending on which side it is. And probably most of the American people tend to react differently to things depending on what side it is. If President Obama does something and President Trump does something, your political feelings may respond. So I don't know that that's a huge deal. They're very different circumstances. Mr. Ellison is not a nominee to be on the Supreme Court. And even if that's wrongdoing on the part of the Democrats, it doesn't really answer the question of whether there's a problem with Kavanaugh.
What precedent do you think this sets for future nominees if Kavanaugh's nomination is derailed in light of what the witnesses are saying, but no clear evidence?
I think it's a very, very bad precedent if there is no evidence and the Supreme Court nomination is brought down simply on the basis of unsubstantiated allegations, because what we would expect is that both parties will start playing that game, and you can always find someone who will come in and say something. And so we may never get another Supreme Court justice through if it's decided that you don't need proof. All you need is one person saying there's wrongdoing.
David Brody tweeted from Kavanaugh's letter, "The vile threats of violence against my family will not drive me out. The last-minute character assassination will not succeed." Your thoughts on this tweet from our colleague covering this?
Well, Justice Kavanaugh is putting up with a lot, or Judge Kavanaugh, hopefully in his perspective, Justice Kavanaugh. It takes a lot of character to be willing to go through this process. And you have to give him credit for hanging in and being willing to subject himself to this. And all I can hope and pray is that the truth wins out. And if he really has done heinous things, that is proven and becomes known. And if he hasn't, that he's able to go on, as Clarence Thomas has, to build his career from here.
Excellent point. We all want truth to bear out. Thank you so much. Brad Jacobs with the Regent University Law School. Here now is a look at some of the other major stories we're following for you today inside the CBN Newsroom. President Donald Trump meets with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein Thursday to discuss his future with the administration. This meeting comes after the New York Times reported Rosenstein talked about recruiting cabinet members to remove President Trump from office. Rosenstein was summoned to the White House Monday as reports speculated he was either going to be fired or resign from his position, but he will stay in his job for now. Meanwhile, the president addresses the UN General Assembly Tuesday. He is expected to discuss North Korea, removing the U.S. from the Iran nuclear accord, and objection to the UN AIDS program he believes are contrary to America's interests. The president will also chair a meeting of the UN Security Council on the topic of counterproliferation. Evangelist Anne Graham Lotz is praising God following successful surgery to remove breast cancer. Earlier this month, she revealed she was diagnosed with the disease and would be undergoing surgery. In a Facebook post, she wrote, quote, "All went well." She also thanked everyone for their prayers. America's UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has a message for Iran. The United States is not to blame for a terrorist attack this weekend in Iran on the annual military parade. Iran's President Rouhani blamed the United States, but Haley said on CNN he should look at the problems in his own country first.
He needs to look at his own home base. He's got the Iranian people are protesting. Every ounce of money that goes into Iran goes to his military. He has oppressed his people for a long time, and he needs to look at his own base to figure out where that's coming from. I think the Iranian people have had enough, and that's where all of this is coming from. But having said that, he can blame us all he wants. The thing he's got to do is look in the mirror.
Haley also says Iran's economy is plummeting after President Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal earlier this year. And still to come here on CBN NewsWatch, in the U.S., there's a good chance you'll commit a crime without even knowing it. We're going to break down the countless federal regulations that Americans break every day. The story's coming up after this. There's something going on in the government that will likely blow your mind. Unelected bureaucrats crafting rules that are putting unsuspecting citizens behind bars. In fact, there are so many of these rules, hundreds of thousands of them, that nobody has ever been able to actually get a handle on the exact number. And the rules are often so outlandish, millions of people break them every day without ever knowing they're committing a crime. Our Jennifer Wishon has this look.
If you get out of bed today, there's a good chance you will commit a crime. There is no one in the United States over the age of 18 who cannot be indicted for some federal crime. That is not an exaggeration, says John Baker, a retired law professor from LSU.
Here at the Library of Congress, this is the Federal Criminal Code. Its pages hold some 5,000 criminal laws passed by Congress and signed by presidents. That's a lot, but it's only a drop in the bucket when you consider there are hundreds of thousands of federal regulations that carry criminal penalties.
I've seen the estimate of at least 300,000, it's probably more like 400 or 500,000 regulations that carry criminal penalties. For instance, it's literally a crime to misuse the Smokey the Bear logo or the Woodsy the Owl logo. It's a crime to write a check for under $1. It's a crime to label malt liquor pre-war strength.
Federal agencies are often given tremendous power by Congress to create regulations that carry criminal penalties and can drastically affect people's lives. Power that's been upheld by the Supreme Court.
Unelected bureaucrats are making regulations that can land you in jail.
Sure, and it's a huge number. We all have one thing in common, me included, which is at one time or another, we have probably violated some criminal regulation. We just don't know it, and we were lucky enough not to get caught and prosecuted.
So how does this happen? Political gridlock and lack of political will in Washington is actually empowering bureaucrats.
In order for members of Congress to get legislation passed to reach compromises while avoiding political pitfalls, they're often vague, leaving the details up to the agencies in charge of the subject matter.
There are so many of these regulations, no one knows how many there are, where they are, and of course these can include traps for the unwary, people who are going about their business, engaging in conduct that they would have had no idea violated any law, much less a criminal law, and they can get tripped up and possibly prosecuted for violating those laws.
And when the government has a hammer, Malcolm says, it tends to use it. This Twitter account tweets a federal crime each day. The project started in 2014 and will not be completed until the year 2848. That's a span of more than 800 years. And it's not just the federal government, state agencies write criminal regulations too.
Feeding the homeless is a crime in many places where people are doing it for a ministry.
John Whitehead, author of Battlefield America, has spent decades representing people in trouble with the law for simply exercising their constitutional rights.
We had a case in Arizona where a pastor wanted to have a Bible study in his home. The regulation, as I remember, was like for 10 people. He had 12 or 13. Some neighbors called. 7 policemen entered his home. He was finally arrested. He ended up serving 60 days in jail. This is for a Bible study. And he was put on house arrest after that with an electronic ankle bracelet.
Critics of federal agencies crafting criminal penalties say most of the time these violations could simply be handled with a fine. They're also skeptical many of the crimes aren't actions most people consider morally wrong. Instead, they're crimes because the government says they are, which is why so many people unwittingly break them.
If we end up criminalizing conduct that your average person would never have recognized was wrong, then people will all of a sudden lose respect for the rule of law.
By the way, did you know it's illegal to walk your dog on federal land on a leash that exceeds 6 feet?
How's the Constitution start? We the people. Whoa, think about that for a second. We the people, that means we're the government. The reason this is happening is because we're not taking action.
You say the change is going to have to trickle up from local governments.
I'm telling people, get down to that local city council, get these things changed. I mean, arresting a pastor 60 days in jail for having a Bible study with a few extra people in his home, is that a danger to society? Well, I don't think so.
It's all a contributing factor to the United States having the largest prison rate in the world. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
And coming up, we're going to take you to the first for-profit business to hire only special needs workers. We're going to give you a taste of the new trend in the food service industry when we come back. The job market is strong with record low unemployment rates across the country. Still, one demographic still struggling to find work is those with special needs. Our Caitlin Burke has the story of one man who's out to change that.
It's hard not to smile when you walk into the Howdy Homemade ice cream shop in Dallas, Texas.
Howdy!
You may notice something unique in the place, but then the samples start coming and you just get caught up in the experience.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How about you?
Good, thank you very much.
In North Texas alone, there are over 240,000 special needs adults looking for work. Howdy Homemade Ice Cream Shop is looking to tackle that statistic as the first for-profit business to only hire special needs workers.
There isn't anything that's warm and fuzzy about this. This is saying that we're a for-profit business. Our employees and the people that our employees represent are a huge opportunity for the restaurant industry and other industries to really start to hire.
Restaurant vet Tom Landis sees special needs employees as a solution to some of the industry's biggest problems.
Employee turnover and poor customer service, and those are both solved I think by people with special needs, that they're friendly continuously over and over again when the average employee just isn't. And at Howdy, we have a 0 turnover rate. You know, our guys love it, and they want to stay around.
When Landis first felt this inspiration, he wanted to give these workers the best shot at success. He didn't feel like his chain of sandwich shops would accomplish that.
And we wanted to look for a slower cadence, one where friendliness was more important than speed, and the ice cream shop idea sort of rose to the top when we filtered everything else out.
Coleman was Landis's first employee.
One of the big football teams has its annual dinner at one of my other restaurants, and we're busy, and Coleman was there as, I think, team manager, but he just kind of started passing out food and helping, and you know, we just kind of noticed him of here's a kid that you know, he didn't need to serve others, he was there, but not only that, he was so, I mean, he's, you know, I felt like by the end of the night he had more friends in that restaurant than I did, and that, you know, he's exactly what the restaurant industry needs.
I like to help make the ice cream sometimes, but personally I also like to be friendly and say hi to the customers, or even say howdy to the customers.
Landis wants others to not only appreciate his business model, but to replicate it.
I think in 5 years, 6 years, you could walk into any McDonald's, any fast food place, and someone with special needs is going to be working there, and you know, they might remember your exact order from a week before, or they might give you a hug, but it will be better than what you're getting now.
And it's not just the restaurant industry he hopes to change.
It takes some additional upfront patience, love, but I think, I mean, God made those with Down syndrome to truly be the very best in the hospitality sense of the word, and then also that those on the autism spectrum, there's just an incredible opportunity for those minds to be harnessed, I think, in the restaurant industry, but also beyond.
As word spreads, interest grows. Landis says at least 50 people want to franchise Howdy Homemade, with new offers coming in each day.
It just seems like there's this beautiful economic intersection where the economy is strong, there's a need for bussers, people to work behind the counter, and there's such a, a guy like Coleman, a guy like Mike Cruz. I mean, 2.5 years ago, no one was going to hire him. Now I'm a little bit worried about, hey, someone's going to poach him.
This isn't just about good business. Landis is out to show the world the capabilities of those with special needs.
We get a lot of people that are driving 2 or 3 hours away, bringing their son or daughter, their grandson here to see that someone with Down syndrome, someone with autism, someone with an IDD can work. And what we love to do is invite them to come behind the counter, wash their hands, and actually serve the ice cream and then ring it up.
And for some employees, running an ice cream shop is just the beginning. 3 are Eagle Scouts, and 1 could become Major League Baseball's first announcer on the autism spectrum.
I mean, every customer that comes in that has a Rangers hat or something, for him to just know the stats is just it's such a God-given talent.
Each and every employee not only exceeds their boss's expectations, but those of their parents, teachers, and even their own. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Dallas, Texas.
What a wonderfully sweet idea. Stay with us. There's much more CBN Newswatch coming up, and it's coming up right after this. Hurricane Florence brought high winds and heavy rains. It also toppled a big tree across Diane Turner's yard. Diane couldn't do anything about the tree on her own. Thankfully, she didn't have to because of the help she received from Operation Blessing.
When Hurricane Florence hit Lumberton, North Carolina, Diane Turner and her family couldn't sleep for days.
Because I've never had insomnia, but I didn't sleep for several days there, several nights. My husband didn't sleep in bed that night. He said, we can't, those trees are likely to fall. And the wind was fierce.
In the middle of the night, a tree came crashing down.
It sounded like a big boom.
They went out in the morning to find a pretty big tree across the yard. Diane couldn't do anything about it on her own. She's been taking care of her 90-year-old mother-in-law, who had to be evacuated from her nursing home. They didn't know what to do about the tree. Then, Operation Blessing showed up. We got right to work cutting the tree apart into manageable pieces to be hauled off. I grabbed one of the saws myself. Diane was grateful not only for the help we gave her, but for what we've been doing for thousands of hurricane victims in North Carolina.
I've seen Jesus in the work that y'all are doing, and God's hand on you there at East Lumberton Baptist Church. I see it on the TV or the Facebook, and that y'all would come this distance to do something for people that you don't even know. Speaks well of all of you.
Once we took care of the tree at Diane's, the crew packed up and got ready for the next job. Before we left, we prayed with Diane and her mother-in-law.
I will pray for all of you, because it's a good thing you're doing. Thank you with all our hearts. Thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you indeed. What a beautiful story. Right now, it is time for your Tuesday Tweetable. It's a thought I hope that you will post, tag, tweet, and share with others. This is a word I actually often heard as a child on Christian radio, and it still holds true today. God is alive and well, and His word will work for you. It resonated with me back then, and it still does today. With that, I encourage you now to get to know Him and get to know His word. And then you'll be able to watch Him work that word for you. I encourage you to do just that and to make this a terrific Tuesday. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. We thank you so much for your company. While this concludes the newscast, remember the news continues 24/7 at cbnnews.com. There you can also find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about. And you can tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day for that matter. You can begin doing that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, on Twitter, as well as Instagram. We certainly welcome you doing just that. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Again, thank you so much for your company. Make it a terrific Tuesday. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless. Thanks for watching.